are you going to give up? Are you going to like stop? I'm like, no, I'm not stopping.
Welcome to Founders Voyage. Our speaker today is very special. He attended the first MIT bootcamp and proceeded to manage several of the following bootcamps. He has put his life behind developing communities for the good of those within them. Many of you will already know Andrew Nguyen.
Hi, my name's Andrew. I attended bootcamp 6 years ago. Super excited to share what I'm doing now. So it's been an interesting journey over the last 6 years since I went to bootcamp. I want to start with a story about why bootcamp was transformational for me. And what was transformational for me at bootcamp was actually before the bootcamp started. At the first bootcamp, or when we were applying to bootcamp, nobody knew what was going to happen. But I think what we knew was that this was a transformational time for everybody who had applied and been accepted. At least for me, I was in a pivotal point in my journey. So my background is in design. I had been working in design for many, many years. I remember starting my first design side gig when I was 17. When you feel invincible and super powerful because the world's at your fingertips. And that was also around the same time when the internet first started in the 90s. So I started doing some design work for companies, designing my own website, writing code for the website. And then that progressed to designing, websites for people. Those website designs ended up becoming, brand identity work. At that point in time, I was in product industrial design program. Then I went on to study some more in Toronto, Canada, and that led to a graphic design degree. And then I graduated and started working in this field called wayfinding. So wayfinding essentially is helping people to find their way. And how we do this is by creating signs, placing them in an environment, say like a subway system or a campus, like a university. And so all that to say, fast forward to where I was in 2014 when I applied to the bootcamp program, was that I was a specialist in this field of design, working at the third most busy subway system or transportation system in North America after Mexico and New York City. And we were rolling out a design program to upgrade and improve the signage. I was looking for a pathway forward, and so that's why I applied to the bootcamp program. The majority of the people who applied are not from around the world. The moment you apply and you get accepted, okay, so confirm your spot, put the $1,000 down. And because everybody's not from around here, the US or North America, $1,000 from a purchasing power parity is significantly exponential. So at the time in 2014, crowdfunding was the way to go. Of course, we're all young and very full and confident of ourselves. So we said, okay, we'll self-organize on Facebook and we'll build a campaign, and everybody's gonna donate to us because we're awesome and because we have this amazing diversity of knowledge that we can leverage to do great things. Of course, looking back, we'll laugh at it because it's such ridiculous bias, right? The whole idea of confirmation bias. But it's incredible. So it's roughly about 15 to 20 people. We self-divided into teams based on our expertise, and then we executed. So self-organized on Facebook in a day, across multiple time zones, from Asia all the way to the US, right? All the different time zones. And we started working right? 72 hours. So it took us 72 hours to launch the first iteration of the crowdfunding campaign. Working in these sub teams, 8-hour shifts, handing off from Asia, so India, from Southeast Asia, South Asia, India, Africa, Europe, and then from all the way to East Coast to West Coast. People were working on videos, websites, donation letters, strategy, copywriting. That was incredible because we were so aligned in vision, mission, and purpose, right? We were short-term focused, get enough money, earn enough money so that we can go to MIT to the bootcamp program. And yeah, so that was exciting. So 72 hours later, we're like, okay, this looks awesome. Good to go. And then took another 72 hours to refine it. And we launched. And so the light bulb moment about building community and why this was so transformational for me was because I was like, how is this possible? Typically, when you build community, you need to be in the same place. You need to know who you typically would have met. You typically would have known somebody for a while. So how is this impossible? We've never met in person, and we've really never known each other, and we've really not done anything. And suddenly, in quite literally in 72 hours, and then with the second cycle of the 72 hours, we've launched a crowdfunding campaign. I have struggled with so many different execution teams in dealing with, launching a website, not to mention a crowdfunding campaign. And so that really took me by surprise. And so I talked to Sid, who was part of my team at boot camp. Obviously, he was, I didn't know him till we met at boot camp. But what happened was like, hey, are you seeing what I'm seeing? How is it that people who have never met from all around the world can do this incredible thing together? How is that even possible? And the only reason why we could think or recognize that this was possible is because of the significant, I would say 99, at least in the group that was implementing the crowdfunding campaign, it was quite literally, it was 99.99% the focus, vision, mission, and direction, and the values. And without that, I don't think that could ever happen going forward. And so that was really transformational. I had submitted a pitch for the bootcamp, and then by the time this had happened, and then I went to the bootcamp, that ended up becoming my new pitch, which is really I want to create a global community that would live as a support group. Because the idea is, if you want to go far, you got to go together, right? The sum is greater than the parts, and you can't do it alone, which is really the basis for the foundation of the community. So essentially what we founded was called Global Entrepreneurs. And then when I had the opportunity to join the bootcamp team, that essentially became the de facto bootcamp community. And that's grown. I'm so excited to share the story with you because, you guys are part of it. That's grown to so many people from all around the world. And really, that's the vision. The vision is you can't do it alone. And if you want to go far and you want to solve problems that are bigger than ourselves, the impact that we want to create that is greater than anything that we can do on our own, I think that's really a big part of that. And so fast forward to the reason for this presentation today is really based on some of the things that were created and that was started. And the London alumni. Spencer, were you part of it?
Of the SSH? Yeah. I went to 2 of them.
Yeah. So, right. So Chrissy's not here. Chrissy, if you're seeing this, you're awesome. So Chrissy and David, I don't know who else was involved, and they started this thing called SSH, which is the secure shell in Unix, but also, it was a super secret hangout. And it's really a way to engage with innovators and to support innovators, because in our innovation and life journeys, stuff happens and there is no one to talk to and you feel all alone. And that has been a challenge for many. And if you read, medium.com, you'll see a lot of innovators and entrepreneurs who have actually shared their journey with mental health. And that's one thing that not many people have specifically focused on in supporting, because it requires a lot of trust, it requires a lot of relationship, and a lot of information that's shared is confidential. So that's why Chrissy and the group of alumni in London started the program. And it was really based on small groups of being able to provide, being able to share how they feel without judgment. So the ability to suspend judgment, the ability to feel supported, and the ability to feel heard, right? In the original program, I think Chrissy was sharing, and I wish Chrissy was here because she could share from her perspective, and maybe that's something she can perhaps jump on a separate call. The idea was that for every super secret hangout, one person would share, and then everybody else would reflect back and share what they heard from their perspective. And as something like one thing that that the person can think about in terms of helping them move forward. Even as simple as like, hey, I empathize with your position where you're at right now. Perhaps consider something to move forward, right? Maybe it's not about moving forward, but just to be heard. More recently, I moved on to a new opportunity here in Peoria, Illinois. Peoria, Illinois is the biggest small city between Chicago and St. Louis. And it's a really exciting place to be. It's a really exciting place because what people typically call a Midwestern third-tier city is actually super vibrant and full of life, and I'm discovering new things every single day. This is historically, this has been also a place of piloting and testing. There's a term or a phrase that goes something like, if it plays in Peoria, it plays anywhere. And this is because I believe in the 18 or 1900s, there was a variety show called vaudeville, and it's the precursor for the variety programming that we have on TV nowadays. And so that's really where that started, or what put Peoria on the map. Some famous companies that have started and launched and grown globally here. One of them that's pretty famous is Caterpillar. For the longest time, Peoria has, rested on its laurels, with Caterpillar being the global and dominant leader in the construction mining industry with their vehicles. But at the same time, that also eclipsed a lot of startups coming out of there. I'm working in innovation and startups here, and one of the things that I'm looking at quite specifically is community-driven entrepreneurship. Right? So the work that I did with boot camps was on a global focus, But going way back to when we founded the global entrepreneurs community, there was always two parts. The first part was the global community, but at the same time, in order to thrive, you always need a local community. And so the local community component that Chrissy and Spencer and all the other, David and all the other people who started locally in London was by far the best community, engaged community on an ongoing basis, because they recognize the need for that, right? They recognize the need to support one another. And I'm so pleased and excited to hear that this continues to go on. And so all that to say that the super secret hangouts was a good part of that. And that continues to, grow with regards to the London community with all the different meetups that you guys are planning. And from my part, I wanted to also share this new program that we're started here. So I'm going to share my screen. Just give me 1 second.
So Andrew's going to share his screen. Everyone who needs to have a look, you'll need to click to join the stream when that pops up.
Yeah, so it's called Red Biz Growth Camp. And so this wasn't started by me. I'm just helping to, run the program with the other people in the team. So it started by a business owner, an entrepreneur here called, his name is Kenneth Mitchell. He currently works in a financial sector. And also it's supported by Dean Hefta, who is a corporate coach and consultant. And so the idea of Red Biz comes from the redwood trees that you commonly see in California. And what's interesting about the redwood trees are that they are super tall, super huge, gigantic trees. The interesting part about these trees are that their root structures, the roots don't go very deep, but what the roots actually do are quite significant, because they weave interconnected webs of root structures throughout the entire redwood forest, which means that every tree at the roots are connected to one another. And so that's the story behind the word Red Biz, right? So the idea of the interconnected structure for business professionals and business owners based on the redwood trees. And so it originally started with a once-a-month lunch meetup. And then when I joined last year, it kind of grew into, hey, we want to do some small groups. And, recognizing their root in their faith. So the majority of the people who are in connection with this are Christians. So we want to live by faith-based values, not very dissimilar to the Alcoholics Anonymous program. So it is a small group experience seeking professional growth environment, and it's designed to build relationships, help you improve on the goals, and you're supported through an accountability exercise over 3 months or 12 weeks. And CAMP is an acronym for Creating Awareness, Mastery, and Progress. And so how this works is that you meet once every 2 weeks to walk through the one thing that you want to work on over the next 12 weeks. And so my story is that I had issues sleeping from a while ago. And so I said, hey, okay, I want to join this group. And that's what I want to work on. So essentially, over that 12 weeks, that group helped me to work on and kept me accountable on being able to improve my sleep cycle. And that 12 weeks ended up, so quite literally, they made a really good suggestion. Take my phone. If you are using your phone before you sleep, don't charge it by your bed. Move it aside, put it somewhere else. And that very night, I got 7 hours and 45 minutes of sleep. So that was a huge breakthrough for me, because a lot of this stuff is all behavioral. So behavioral change is hard, and that's why you need help to move forward, and you can't do it on your own. There's no way. Very few people, I would say. I have not met one single person who has had any sort of behavioral change on their own. They typically have help from somebody. Then I went into the second group, and then the second group, my thing that I wanted to change was to improve my eating habits. And for me, improving my eating habits means that I gain a level of discipline, I gain a level of change in my routine, and that fundamentally impacts everything else in my work environment. It fundamentally impacts how I structure my day, my work, my personal life, and everything else. And so even though it may not necessarily be a professional area that I'm actually improving on, the personal aspects that I'm trying to work on actually improve the output that I see in my professional life. So that to me has been quite significant. Okay, so how does this work exactly? So you have to own it, right? Like we talked about it in bootcamp, own the problems you want to solve. And so we're not owning other people's problems, we're owning our own problems, right? So I'm owning the problem of establishing a good sleep pattern. I'm owning the problem of eating well, or eating in a new routine that I'm not used to. And that's where the support comes in. And so each group has about 4 to 5 people that are committed to you, right? By joining a group like that, you say, yes, I'm not going to own your problem, but I'm going to be committed to pushing you and encouraging you and praying for you to say, hey, you're where you are, but I'm going to walk this journey out with you. And that is rare and that is hard. But that's essentially the people who sign up for this program. You're basically saying, you recognize that I am weak, you're weak, but together we are strong. And that's similar to the whole idea of redwood trees, right? And how it works is there's 6 one-hour meetings that occur. So it's bi-weekly. And the reason why it's bi-weekly is because change is hard and it takes time. And, you need to not just attend the group, but also time for you to implement that. And so in addition to that, it's also to connect with other business owners and professionals in the region. And that's why there's also a one-on-one conversation that you're encouraged to reach out to one another. Not unlike to what we do at bootcamp, because we already do it. Every time there's a new bootcamp that's just over, everybody's like, oh, let's connect with somebody else that I haven't met before. So super excited about that part too. And so because of the coronavirus, what used to be geographically restricted to the Greater Peoria area now is open to the world. So we're starting this new one called Growth Camp Online. And it's open to anyone and everyone who is searching for professional development in a safe environment, right? So that brings me to this next registration form, and I'll share the link later. So the orientation that's coming up is on May 6th. That's 12:30 Central Time, 1:30 p.m. Eastern, 10:30 a.m. Pacific, or May 8th on Friday, 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific. And then that goes on for 12 weeks. And so there's 6 group meetings. Let's see, what else? So everything's 100% confidential. And what you share in your group, every group member agrees to keep everything that's shared there confidential within the group and is not to be repeated elsewhere.
So, first thing I wanted to ask is, so you said you were working on sleep and diet for your 2 sessions that you've done. So it doesn't have to be necessarily a professional thing, but it should be some sort of personal behavioral change you're after.
Well, it really doesn't matter as long as you can clearly quantify it and articulate it in a way that people can hold you accountable. Because if it's not sufficiently clear and not actionable or not measurable, then it'll be quite difficult to be accountable for anything, right? So the idea of a SMART goal, essentially, right? Specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and timely.
Thank you. And so it's a 12-week session with 6 people and the same 6 people, right?
Yeah, so it's about, I want to say the ideal size is 4 to 5 people at the max. Because we want to give enough time and we want it to be small enough so that we're not struggling for time, because we want to keep those sessions about 1 hour. Otherwise it gets really long. So that's really the idea and focus of small groups, because otherwise everybody can't engage and share in a more deeper way.
Okay, so it is very much about that sort of small, connected group of people working together.
Yeah. Because it's hard to engage on a very large level, right? Like in a large group, it's very hard for anybody to feel heard, to feel that they matter. And so that's why keeping it to small groups makes a lot of sense. Because you can't build deep connections if you don't invest that time.
I was just going to say, I loved the breadwood analogy. I thought that was really great. I don't know which of the founders came up with that, but I think that's really great. So how long did you say that the group was in existence before you joined?
Probably like a year or so, maybe. But they were just doing like lunch sessions, right? And they were just like roundtable, large, maybe 10, 20 people roundtable type sessions on like, oh, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, sharing locally. But at the same time, I think they wanted to progress to a deeper level of, getting to know each other and why we do what we do. And really, I think that's really at the heart of it, right? Like, we see, and this is not something new that I haven't talked about. We see the output. We see the output all the time. But we don't understand their motivation behind why people do what they do and how they do it and how they achieve whatever level of success they have achieved. And so the driving force behind that is to uncover those things in a small group setting so that, we can all be supported.
I definitely agree with you that that's something that people feel a lot more comfortable and can happen more naturally in a small group setting. However, I personally want to perpetuate that as a movement around the world. How do you think that you can scale out? And maybe this is like a really bad way to ask it, but scale out that sort of interconnectedness that you have in that sort of group?
That's a really great question, because that's a big question that's being asked at boot camp for a very long time. How do you scale the community? At what cost? How do you create a support structure like that? And so my go-to reference is this book called The Starfish and the Spider by this guy called Ori Brofman. And it's building the idea of headless groups, right? Or peer-to-peer communities. And so, yes, you come in to get help, but then you get trained and empowered in the group, and then you go on to either lead your group or establish groups in your community where you are. So in the case of where we're at right now, it started as a geographically restricted location in Peoria here for our 5-county region. But at the same time, it is not a stretch to say that this couldn't happen where you are in Sacramento, California. It couldn't happen in London, in the UK, or in India, or anywhere else, because the fundamental culture, alignment, values, and training are the same. And so you come in for one purpose, but then you don't necessarily exit because really you have benefited from the program, and that program becomes its own thing, right? It lives on its own, right? Like Alcoholics Anonymous is not going to disappear. Why? Because we know we're followable, because we know we need help, because we know we need to get to a meeting. No different, right? So that's really where we're at.
That's a great answer to a very complex question. I appreciate your thoughts.
Yeah. So you learn, you go through the process, and that's just the part of it where you can always improve. Probably the day you stop improving is when the day you cease to exist. I can see that there will always be a need for something like this. So yeah, we're piloting now, and if there's something that you like to explore, we encourage you to join us.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And it seems like this sort of community or interesting community has been something that's followed you for quite a while, right? Like you started, as you told us, in more of a design things, and now you've gone to much more social, community-based sort of interests and pursuits. Do you feel like this is like it seems like you've gone sort of improving sort of the focus of what you're working on? Do you feel like this is sort of, at least for now, the tip of what you've been working towards, or do you feel like there's more you want to do with it?
Great question. So I spent the first half of my career chasing the things that everybody else wants, right? Money, car, condo, credit card, etc., etc., etc. I want to spend the rest of my life creating impact that is long-lasting impact, right? And you may have already heard this, at the Harvard program, the question that the professor will ask is, what are you going to do with your one very precious life? And you know, I've seen people more recently have loved ones pass away. What is the legacy that you will leave behind? What do you want to be known for? Very often we are entrepreneurs and innovators in the areas of expertise that we're gifted and talented, or even learn to grow in those areas. But at the end of the day, we typically are experts in one or two, at the most three things. How am I? And I would ask the same question for you. What do you want to do with that one valuable and precious life, right? How can you impact society, impact the world, impact your spheres of influence and networks in the way that you want to be remembered for, right? And maybe this is also a thought exercise. If you had to design your tombstone today, what would it say? What would Andrew be known for? Connector of people and lover of souls. I don't know. Relationship builder. Impacting lasting change in people's lives, right? Changing people's lives for the better, maybe something like that. And that's one hard question I ask myself all the time. What am I doing? Is what I'm doing now doing that, right? So culture, of course. Like I said, spent the first half of my life shaping the life to the job, right, to the work. But now what I want to do is work with people to shape the careers to the lives that people want to lead, right, and to solve problems in that part. And then expertise, that's part of what you already have. That's where I'm at.
Hey, Andrew, Wasim here. Good to see you. So I have a question, and it's related to something that I'm working on, and I think you are privy to some information about that project. So, for the others, it's something that I presented to you during that MIT reunion. So it's about how we can remove certain barriers to reaching to getting information about care, whether it's diabetes. And in that process, one of the ways by which I wanted to add a human element was by building community. So, do you think this would work, Andrew, in a virtual space? For example, if I was able to bring that product to life, and if we had a large community of diabetics, hypertension, people with diabetes, hypertension, and maybe you had a community which said, young diabetics, and this worked for me, this didn't work for me, or somebody saying, hey, yes, I'm a diabetic, but I love this, but I was able to do this and still keep my sugars under Do you think this community will work in that kind of a setting, in a very large virtual setting with thousands of people in an app, in multiple small communities? Do you think that's even feasible? Do you think it's something I want to do? Do you think it's worth? Sorry.
I think so. I think so because they're united by. Do I think it's worth doing and experimenting? Absolutely.
Yeah. So. That's what I wanted to ask. If or do you have some direction as to some sense of which direction to start with when I ultimately plan to bring that community inside?
Absolutely. So what is the one uniting factor? The one uniting factor is that it's clear that everybody has diabetes. This is a lifelong chronic condition. This is something that, as far as traditional medicine is concerned, is not healable, right? It's lifelong. There's no known cure, at least at this point. And so they're stuck with it. Now, how do you deal with that? And so I think community is going to be a big piece. So one example, Dr. Suzanne Mitchell from Boston Medical Center has piloted a virtual community for that, and then that's now being tested. The Philadelphia healthcare system. So definitely, I would say that's something to consider because, you can empathize. Only a diabetic will really understand what a diabetic goes through, right? The highs, the lows, the crashes, the times where you're in an insulin deficient position, what that feels like. Can't replace that. I hope that answers your question, Wasim.
It does, yes. Thank you. So it's something that I needed to hear with somebody who has experience building communities, whether this is worth pursuing as part of the project. So I think now that I hear it, I will add that into phase 1 or phase 2. Thanks for that.
Yeah, and I'm happy to explore that with you. Maybe this is something that we can experiment.
Wow, okay, that'll be great. Whenever we end up in Peoria,
yeah, it'll be fun.
I will explain the process.
Well, when you get to fly all over again,
as soon as the airlines are not out of business.
So.
Well, I was going to say, on that last comment, Wasim, you accomplish a lot from where you are. I mean, you had a huge impact on the reunion that we had, even though you weren't able to be physically there. And I know that your reach is far, from where you are, and that is so needed right now. So I honestly kind of wanted to ask you, Andrew, how do you think we can take some of those good changes that have, I hate to say good changes that have come out of this pandemic, but looking at the silver lining of things, people really have plugged into community in an amazing way. Like, how do we keep that going forward, as we all get back to, tasking ourselves again?
Yeah, great question. So I think in times of crisis, we fall back to our most basic needs. And so I think for me personally, as being my faith has been my anchor. That's one big thing, which is why I think they're not something that I typically publicly share as a driver for why I do what I do. The other part to that too is the ability to be flexible in uncertain and ambiguous times, right? If you look at the 5 stages of grief, because in a crisis situation that we're all in together right now, we are in a grieving process of what is our routine, because we have been abruptly, like a roller coaster, right? It was this huge, sharp, abrupt shift into the unknown. And I want to say the biggest things that we who have been through the boot camp, have some level of experience with is we were all in some place of uncertainty. And what we've gone through, the experience in the boot camp has helped us to become more comfortable with ambiguity. Again, all at different levels. But being comfortable with ambiguity is a huge piece, because guess what? The rest of the world is not comfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty. And so we actually have a leg up on them, because we've been through that ridiculous process that has in some way shaped our lives to be more resilient, to be able to think on our feet, to be able to say, let's hit the pause button for a second. The world is going nuts. Let's look at what's around us. Do we have any assets that we can start leveraging right now? Can we start taking some time to reflect and think through what we can do going forward? That's really where I'm thinking about. I hope that answers your question, Nancy.
I think that's actually a really good question and a good answer, Andrew. Like, I feel like there are so many things that will have been changed from the current situation. And if we can find the sort of positive results from it, I think that could be an exceptionally good thing. But I guess at the end of the day, only time will tell how much we manage to actually maintain and how quickly our memories forget.
Absolutely. So that's the good side about it, right? So the good side is the removal of geographic restrictions for small businesses that are traditionally retail or local. The flip side is that there is a lot more noise, right? It has been an increasingly noisy environment locally as well as globally. And this is where I think it's also great that we've been through the program that teaches the MIT entrepreneurship framework, discipline, entrepreneurship, user innovation, etc. And the reason why I'm saying this is because we need to double down on understanding who our customers are. We need to double down on the problems that are worth solving. We need to double down on understanding product market fit. And the groups and the people who will be successful are the ones that, put shifts, right? We're shifting resources into these areas. Not just investing the resources, but reallocating the resources that we're currently spending or investing on, time, efforts, whatever, into deeply understanding customers, our target audiences, and to be quite specific. In fact, I would say even more laser focused than we are before. That's really a big part, because you're not going to cut through the noise if you don't have a laser focus.
And I think that's that's going to be just more and more important, because as you said, in our times, we aren't suffering from a lack of information. We always have just more and more noise going on. And I have to admit, that's something that I actually personally had a lot of trouble with, actually getting focus on things, because there's always a million different things that you can be working on or taking interest in or be pursuing at any given time, and it is very difficult to actually have a reasonable idea of which one you're going to do, or at least, to maintain a good focus on what you're wanting to do, especially with all that noise going on. I think that as a point is going to be something that more and more people have to figure out how to deal with.
And that's actually a good goal for someone to work on in one of our upcoming Red growth camps, because focus is such a key area, right? So key area in behavior change, because it impacts everything. So what are the ways that you can be accountable to somebody or to a group of people on that, right? So if you, let's say, I need more focus on, my robotics work, as an example, or I need to create more focus in my schedule. How can I behaviorally design an intervention so that I can be significantly more focused? For example, for me, if it doesn't exist in my calendar, it's not real. So one thing I do, and this is called in behavioral economics or science of behavior change, it's called a pre-commitment device. It's based on the story of Ulysses sailing past the Isle of the Sirens. So what he did was he had his men, his sailors, tie him to the mast, and they rigged the steering wheel of the ship to sail straight. And so basically he knew that if he had any sort of control, he would sail into the rocks and crash like everybody else. So that's why he had the sailors tie him up and tie the ship to sail straight, and have everybody hide down under the deck. And so similarly, coming back to the story of my calendar, why I schedule time in my calendar is because I know that I'm going to forget things. I am going to miss out on things because our memory is finite, because we, and really at the end of the day, it's energy management, right? You have to dedicate significant amount of energy to remember things actively, proactively remember things. And so the more that we can offload that into the automatic system and be like, I already want to do something and I'm pre-positioning myself to follow through on the things that I've scheduled time for, right? One other example that is quite important for me is we schedule time for meetings, but guess what? We don't schedule time to actually execute on work. That is something that I'm going to be working on going forward, right? I'm doing that in part already, but I'm not as consistent as I could be. So I think going forward for me, the next goal for my next group will probably be something like that in that area, so that I pre-plan out and that becomes something that I set a goal towards too, especially for time allocation.
I like that as a system. I think I should probably get into using calendars more. I find I'm not very consistent at all with them. Do you use Outlook?
Yeah, so and it definitely, I use Google Calendar. So it always baffles me the amount of so for example, I know some people who use a paper agenda and calendar, and it always baffles me how people can do that, because it requires, at least from my perspective, it requires so much mental energy to go flip through the pages, to go update it when it changes and all that stuff. I don't know how people do it. Right? Whereas if you do it on the phone, so I'm very thankful for a digital calendar where it automatically updates itself if somebody needs to change a date, if somebody needs to change a time. So I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah. And where someone else can like send you updates with all the information. So you don't have to worry about writing it all down yourself.
Yeah.
And Doc was also just mentioned time zones are so much more convenient to have a digital one. I couldn't imagine organizing like a Zoom call with multiple people without a digital calendar.
So it doesn't make sense. Yeah. So to me, like any sort of calendar on the wall or agenda booklet type of thing doesn't make sense. But hey, some people like to do some paper stuff and write down stuff. Maybe that's the action part. For them, that makes sense. But yeah.
Exactly.
Honestly, I can tell that today is the precursor to a behavior modification too, because could probably go deep into that too, because I don't know if you still do this, Andrew, but I remember that you had, even though things like Trello exist, you had a wall of sticky notes. You're a Google Calendar user, right? And for me, like
absolutely
like having like a physical journal for some items that I keep track of.
Yeah.
And it does take more time, but I think that's part of the reason that I like that. But I also really like the convenience of digital organization. Actually, for the reason that Wasim listed, I really have become a huge fan of Google Calendar. It also has to do with how we're able to view something, like the value of it. So efficiency is part of that value, but it's not the only factor. I don't know if you still have your wall of sticky notes, but if you do, I respect that because I do things like that.
Yeah. So behavior change is hard unless you design specifically for an intervention to change behavior. It is not going to happen by default, right? For example, if I am going to go to the grocery store and coming back to food all over again, if I'm going to the grocery store to buy food, I am not going to buy, junk because I know that I'm going to have to eat it. Right? So we control our environment, and it's based on the idea of this thing called choice architecture. If we are in control of our environment, we need to create an environment that is conducive for the interventions to happen. Because currently, this is our routine. Wake up in the morning, brush teeth, eat breakfast, eat lunch, go to work, whatever, exercise. And so if you're in control of your environment and you want to change your existing routine and your defaults, because you're in control of that, you're able to do it. But if you're, for example, why is it so hard for people to get married and adjust when after they get married and start living together, as an example, right? Because the routines on both sides could be quite different. Like I wake up at, I sleep at 9 o'clock, you sleep at 2 a.m. And Nancy, maybe you and Brian can talk about that. How was it difficult? Was it difficult, in adjusting? Because suddenly the two different environments and the defaults are very different. And maybe yours was the same, I don't know. How did you even design the change together? And it takes time and it's so hard to overcome our natural abilities. For example, if you always brush your teeth with your right hand, you're not going to overnight change to brush your teeth with your left hand, right? So there's a lot that needs to be overcome in terms of designing and implementing behavior change.
I mean, you're talking about something much more complicated too, which is like a merger of systems. And I mean, you think of this as a company standpoint too, like So when two, big companies merge together, whose system do you adopt? Are you going to have some sort of a hybrid? Or is one company just going to submit to the way the other company was? Or are you just going to sort of survive alongside one another? And I think we've probably been through a lot of the elements of all of those. Honestly, that's probably a conversation for another day too. But you said the word control. Like part of my brain goes, control is an illusion. And I can say that that if you want my marriage as an example, the day after we got engaged and we had this great little plan, we got laid off, and that plan changed a lot. So part of that system, whatever it is, has to be coming back to that core of what your founding group agrees upon, your community strength, whatever that is. There has to be that X factor. So I'm going to circle right back to our topic of community and say that that's the X factor that's missing from a lot of what people try to do. And I want to figure out how you put that in a pill form that you can give to people. No, I'm just kidding. You can't. But I do want to figure out how to perpetuate it, because I think that it's something beautiful coming out of this right now.
So the pill form, I can give you a pill form. It's one word. Can you guess what that word is?
No.
So the pill form and the word is culture. We are perpetuators of culture. Right? These are the unseen, unspoken, unwritten rules of engagement. And this really comes down to the values and of why we want to live our lives the way we live them. That's really it, I think.
That's beautiful. I totally agree with you. We want to perpetuate the culture that we want to see.
Yeah. So somebody famous said, be the change you want to see, right? And that's what we have to do. Own the problems we want to solve. Be the change we want to see. Explicit about it. And so going forward, I think out of the coronavirus pandemic, we're going to see a lot more tribes that you want to be part of. The tribe and community that you want to engage in. What are the values? What are the values that you want to perpetuate, and what is the environment that you want to create?
Well, thanks for being part of ours, and thanks for helping grow this this kind of adventure in trying to connect us all.
Absolutely, it's been my pleasure to serve, and I look forward to continuing this relationship with everyone.
Do you have a link for Red Biz?
Yes. Facebook page is /RedBizGrowth Camp. That's the Facebook page, and then the sign up page is Red Biz. Yeah, so those are the two links.
Thank you, Andrew.
So I didn't. Yes, thank you. And I didn't catch it. Is it open to people outside of the geographic region?
Yes. So it is, because we're going to be 100% online. So it's open to everybody in the entire world right now. People who want to walk through the next 12 weeks, starting next week with us in terms of, growing professionally in some way or another.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Great talking to you. Take care, everyone.
This has been Nancy and Spencer on Founders Voyage Weekly Podcast. Our speaker each week can be reached through our Discord server. Our intro and outro music is from the song Something for Nothing by Reverend Peyton's Big Damn Band. We'll be back again next week for another episode. Until then, have a great day and continue your voyage.